The rhythmic thud of a punching bag, a muffled percussive beat against the hum of Los Angeles traffic, was a familiar soundtrack to Jake Thorne's life. In his late 30s, Jake was a veteran stunt double in the cutthroat world of Hollywood, a realm of dazzling illusion where he existed largely in the shadows. He was a man defined by his quiet competence, his meticulous preparation for feats of calculated danger, and a profound, almost spiritual respect for the craft itself. While others chased fame, Jake chased perfection in motion, a silent dedication to the art of controlled chaos. His apartment in Van Nuys, California, a Spartan, organized space with gleaming hardwood floors and minimalist furniture, was a stark contrast to the flamboyant glitz of the industry he served. It was a place of discipline, devoid of personal mementos save for a single, worn boxing glove, signed simply, "To Jake, keep punching." Coach Mike, a forgotten mentor's tribute that hinted at a past where dedication was its own visceral reward. He found solace in solitary, rigorous physical training, each sweat-drenched session a meditation, a reaffirmation of his quiet mastery. His dinner ritual was a solitary affair, a testament to his disciplined existence. It was always a protein-rich meal: grilled chicken, steamed vegetables, precise portions of quinoa, consumed in silence, illuminated by the cold glow of a large monitor. The screen didn't display the latest blockbuster or a streaming series. It showed footage of his past stunts. He would dissect every movement, every fall, every explosive impact, searching for imperfections only he could see, minute flaws that no director or audience would ever notice. There was a quiet pride in this physical discipline, a self-contained satisfaction in mastering the limits of the human body, pushing it beyond what was thought possible, all for the sake of an illusion. He was the unsung hero, the invisible architect of spectacular moments, and in that anonymity, he found a quiet, profound contentment. One chaotic Monday morning, the usual labyrinthine sprawl of the Los Angeles freeway system became a scene of sudden, terrifying gridlock. Jake, driving his understated black Ford F-150, was on his way to the set in downtown LA for the filming of Apex, a high-octane action thriller. The sun, already blazing, glared off chrome, and the air was thick with the growl of engines. Suddenly, ahead of him, tires screeched, metal shrieked, and a sickening symphony of impacts erupted. A multi-car pileup, a violent accordion of mangled steel and shattered glass. Thick plumes of black smoke began to curl from a crushed minivan in the middle of the wreckage. Jake, despite the shock, reacted instinctively. He threw his truck into park, grabbed a fire extinguisher from behind his seat, and was out of the cab before most drivers had even registered the full extent of the disaster. As he approached the smoking minivan, he saw them, a young family. A frantic mother struggled with a jammed seatbelt, her face pale with terror. In the back, two small children, no older than 5, were screaming, trapped in their car seats as smoke began to fill the vehicle. Emergency services were still miles away, caught in the burgeoning gridlock. Without a moment's hesitation, Jake assessed the wreckage. The driver's side door was crushed. He didn't think about procedure, about liability, about recognition. He saw only people in dire need. He handed the fire extinguisher to a stunned bystander, barking, "Keep the flames down." Then, with a practiced, almost preternatural calm, he began to work. He used his immense physical prowess, a lifetime of training kicking in, to wrench the mangled passenger door open, his muscles straining with raw power. He carefully unbuckled the terrified children, handing them gently to the mother, then helped her extricate herself from the mangled car, all while the acrid smell of burning plastic stung his nostrils. Just as the first wail of distant sirens reached them, and a knot of curious onlookers began to form, Jake, true to his nature, quietly melted back into the crowd. He wasn't there for praise. He was there because he could help. It was a quiet act of heroism, largely unnoticed by the wider world, showcasing his inherent selflessness and incredible skill, making him immediately endearing to any silent observer. He was the invisible hand, the unseen force of good, a man whose actions spoke volumes while he himself remained a whisper. Back on set, the controlled chaos of filmmaking provided a stark contrast to the raw, uncontrolled chaos of the freeway. During a break, Jake, stretching in a quiet corner of the soundstage, found his gaze drifting to his left wrist. There, almost invisible against the tanned skin, was a small, almost imperceptible scar. It was a thin, jagged line, faded with time. But it hinted at something more than a routine injury. It was an anomaly, a whisper of a forgotten incident, a moment of profound physical or emotional trauma that had left a permanent mark. His stretches, too, were unusual. They went beyond the standard flexibility and strength exercises of typical stunt training. He would execute seemingly random, yet incredibly complex movements, fluid, almost dance-like sequences that combined elements of parkour, martial arts, and something else, something esoteric and precise. A casual observer might dismiss it as a quirky warm-up routine, but to a trained eye, it hinted at a background in a specialized, almost esoteric form of combat or survival training. It was the silent language of a body honed not just for performance, but for extreme conditions, for life-or-death scenarios. This created a subtle curiosity about his past, a suggestion that his extraordinary abilities were not just talent, but the product of a profound, forgotten ordeal that had shaped him into something far more than just a stunt double. He carried a secret strength, a quiet power forged in fires unknown. The film set for Apex, a high-octane action thriller, was a controlled frenzy, a hive of activity where precision met chaos under the glaring Los Angeles sun. Cameras swooped on cranes, crew members barked orders into headsets, and the air buzzed with the anticipation of a thrilling sequence. The star of the show, Damian Blackwood, was a Hollywood A-lister, famous for his chiseled good looks, magnetic charisma, and an ego that rivaled the city's tallest skyscrapers. He was, however, infamous among the crew for his vanity and a condescending attitude towards his stunt team, a group he often referred to as "my highly paid marionettes." Today's scene involved a particularly complex wirework sequence. Damian's character, a rogue agent, had to swing from a crumbling skyscraper ledge, navigating a series of explosive charges before landing safely on a lower platform. It was a dangerous ballet of physics and timing, meticulously choreographed by Jake and the stunt coordinator. But Damian, fueled by a desire to prove he could do his own stunts and a thinly veiled disdain for his double, insisted on performing the crucial mid-air maneuver himself. Despite Jake's quiet, firm warnings about the inherent risks. "Relax, Jake," Damian had sneered earlier, flexing his biceps for a nearby camera. "It's just a little swing. Anyone with half a brain and a good core can handle it. You stunt guys make it look harder than it is, just to justify your exorbitant day rates." He had laughed, a dismissive, arrogant sound that grated on Jake's nerves. As the cameras rolled, Damian launched himself from the ledge. His initial swing was textbook, but then, as he approached the apex of his arc, where the wire needed to be precisely adjusted for the next explosive charge, Damian, attempting to add a flourish he hadn't rehearsed, deliberately botched a move. His timing was off, his body rigid instead of fluid. He swung wildly, perilously close to a section of the set rigged with pyrotechnics. A spark ignited prematurely. For a heart-stopping moment, he hung suspended, twisting awkwardly, his face contorted in a mask of dawning panic, inches from a potentially catastrophic explosion. The air technicians, their faces pale, frantically tried to correct his trajectory. But it was too late. Jake, who had been watching from the sidelines with hawk-like intensity, reacted instinctively. He didn't wait for orders. He didn't hesitate. With a blur of motion, he grabbed a safety line, launched himself from a hidden platform, and swung through the air, intercepting Damian's perilous trajectory. His movements were fluid, precise, a testament to years of rigorous training. With a powerful, controlled surge, he pulled Damian away from the explosive, absorbing the impact with his own body, redirecting their momentum, and expertly guiding them both to land safely, albeit roughly, on the lower platform. just as the set piece exploded behind them in a controlled, but still dangerous, burst of pyrotechnics. Jake had used his superior skills, his unwavering competence, to prevent a major injury, saving Damien from his own arrogance. The set went silent, then erupted into a chaotic mixture of shouts and exclamations. Director Miller, a man known for prioritizing star ego over safety, rushed towards Damien, his face a mixture of relief and irritation. Damien, still shaken, pushed himself up, his face pale beneath his makeup. He saw Jake, standing calmly beside him, his gaze steady, devoid of accusation. Damien Blackwood, utterly humiliated by Jake's intervention, immediately lashed out. He couldn't stand being shown up, especially by his own double. "What the hell was that, Thorne?" Damien roared, loud enough for the nearby crew to hear. "Are you trying to steal my thunder? That was completely unnecessary. I had it under control. Your over-enthusiasm and unnecessary heroics almost ruined the shot." He turned to Director Miller, his voice dripping with condescension. "He's just an overpaid technician, always trying to make a name for himself. Honestly, Miller, he thinks his rehearsed acrobatics are some kind of true bravery. It's just a stunt, not a heroic rescue mission." Damien's words, delivered with a casual cruelty, were a blatant attempt to downplay the danger and imply Jake was merely an attention-seeking subordinate. This public humiliation and professional discredit cut deep for Jake. It wasn't just a slight. It was a direct assault on the very core of his identity and dedication to his craft. He lived for the quiet mastery, the unseen perfection of his work. To have it dismissed as mere acrobatics, to be ridiculed for saving a life, felt like a profound disrespect for his quiet expertise. The unspoken agreement between actor and double, the understanding that the double performed the dangerous, complex work to make the actor look good, was utterly violated. Jake initially recoiled from the blatant injustice. He felt a wave of profound disillusionment wash over him, a weariness that settled deep into his bones. He considered quitting the industry entirely, walking away from the thankless work, the constant ego battles, the endless anonymity, the public mockery and the dismissive attitude of Director Miller who, after a brief, tense exchange with Damien, merely gave Jake a tight-lipped, non-committal nod, clearly prioritizing his star's ego and the film's reputation above all else, fueled his disillusionment. He had spent years honing his skills, risking his life for moments of cinematic spectacle, only to be publicly ridiculed for competence. However, as the day wore on, a small, persistent detail began to gnaw at him. Later that evening, back in his apartment, Jake meticulously reviewed the footage of the botched stunt, frame by painstaking frame. He watched Damien's movements, his eyes keen and analytical. He noticed the subtle, almost imperceptible flaws in Damien's understanding of physics and leverage, the microsecond hesitation before the crucial wire adjustment, the stiffening of his core instead of a fluid rotation. These weren't just acting mistakes. They were fundamental errors in kinetic transfer, flaws that, left unchecked, could lead to genuine, life-threatening danger. The arrogance that had fueled Damien's botched attempt was, in fact, a dangerous ignorance. A deep-seated sense of professional responsibility, a core tenet of his unspoken code, stirred within Jake. It wasn't a protective instinct for Damien's personality, but a rare, almost protective instinct for the careless actor's physical safety. A quiet acknowledgement that Damien, for all his arrogance, was still utterly vulnerable in this dangerous world. He couldn't abandon his craft, couldn't abandon the faint, almost unseen danger that still hovered around Damien Blackwood. The knowledge, the terrifying precision of the physics involved, would not let him rest. He had to act. The final, decisive blow came during the wrap party for the completed segment of filming, a lavish affair held at a trendy Hollywood Hills mansion. Damien Blackwood, fueled by champagne and an overflowing ego, cornered Jake by the poolside. In front of a cluster of key industry figures, producers, studio executives, a prominent director, Damien clapped Jake on the shoulder, a condescending gesture. Jake, old boy. Damien slurred, his voice loud and booming, ensuring everyone within earshot could hear. Heard you were worried about my little swing today. Well, get this. The studio just loved my commitment. And guess what? I've convinced them to reinsert the climactic Angel's Leap sequence. The one we cut because it was too dangerous for even your skill set. He grinned, a cruel, triumphant smirk aimed directly at Jake. And I'm going to do it myself. No double. Just me, Damien Blackwood. Proving that true stars don't need a stand-in. Consider it a public humiliation for your overprotective nature. A direct challenge to your relevance. Jake, this public insult, this deliberate attempt to diminish Jake's professional worth, coupled with the clear and present danger Damien was putting himself in, solidified Jake's resolve. The Angel's Leap was a notoriously dangerous stunt involving a free fall from a towering structure, a maneuver even veteran stuntmen considered suicidal without meticulous preparation. Damien, in his arrogance, was signing his own death warrant. Jake knew then, with chilling certainty, that he could not return to merely being a faceless double, a silent, invisible presence. His quiet life, his carefully maintained anonymity, was now undeniably entangled with Damien's reckless self-destruction. He had to ensure Damien's safety, even if it meant confronting the arrogant star head-on, even if it meant risking his entire career. The stage was set, and the reluctant hero was about to be forced into the spotlight. The glittering facade of the rap party, a flimsy veil over Hollywood's simmering tensions, did little to soothe Jake Thorne's churning stomach. Damien Blackwood's arrogant pronouncements about performing the Angel's Leap himself had ignited a cold fire of dread in Jake's gut. The jump was notoriously dangerous, a free fall from a towering structure designed to look like a climactic escape. Without the meticulous planning and flawless execution of a seasoned professional, it was a death wish. Jake, despite his reserved nature and his deep-seated aversion to the spotlight, knew he was forced to intervene. This wasn't about ego. It was about preventing a tragedy, about protecting a man, however arrogant, from his own fatal hubris. He found Damien Blackwood in his lavish trailer the next morning, a sprawling oasis of luxury and self-importance. The air inside was thick with the scent of expensive cologne and the faint aroma of stale coffee. Damien, lounging on a plush leather sofa, was reviewing lines, a bored expression on his impeccably sculpted face. Damien, Jake began, his voice calm, betraying none of the internal turmoil. Damien barely looked up. Ah, Jake, come to wish me luck with the Angel's Leap, or perhaps to offer some unsolicited advice. He chuckled, a condescending sound. Neither, Jake replied, stepping further into the trailer. I'm here to show you why you can't do the Angel's Leap yourself. He didn't boast. He simply stated a fact. Damien scoffed. Oh, really? And what makes you a glorified acrobat? So sure. Jake didn't answer with words. Instead, he moved. The trailer, though spacious for a single actor, was a confined space. Yet, Jake transformed it into a training ground. He didn't need wires or safety nets. Using only a few quick, almost imperceptible movements, he began to demonstrate the complex physical maneuver required for the jump. He moved from a standing position, subtly adjusting his center of gravity, shifting his weight with precise calculation, miming the exact body mechanics needed to absorb the impact of the initial fall and then transition into the controlled free fall. He showed how a millimeter of error in the pivot point, a degree off in the body angle, could send a person spiraling uncontrollably. He replicated the exact physics of the planned stunt, subtly revealing how Damien's proposed, amateurish execution would lead to catastrophic failure, a broken spine, a shattered skull, a guaranteed death. His movements were fluid, economical, a silent testament to decades of rigorous training and an intuitive understanding of kinetic energy and force distribution. He moved like a ghost, a blur of silent, precise power, demonstrating the immense danger with chilling clarity. Damien, initially dismissive, slowly sat upright. His face, usually so composed, betrayed a flicker of genuine unease, then something akin to fear. He watched Jake's movements, his arrogance momentarily eclipsed by the stark reality of the physics involved. The demonstration lasted mere seconds, but it spoke volumes. Jake wasn't showing off. He was showing Damien precisely how he would die. He wasn't seeking recognition. He was compelled by the clear and present danger to Damien's life. As Jake finished, returning to a relaxed stance, the trailer door, which had been slightly ajar, clicked shut. Maria Rodriguez, a quiet but exceptionally observant set medic, stood just inside, a first aid kit clutched in her hand. She had been passing Damien's trailer, ostensibly to restock supplies, but the unusual silence, followed by the subtle sounds of movement, had piqued her curiosity. She had overheard Jake's precise technical explanations about G-forces and impact points, and witnessed his astonishing physical prowess. Maria, initially skeptical of Jake's overly cautious reputation among the less experienced crew, now saw the truth behind his quiet competence and his hidden talents. Her eyes, intelligent and empathetic, met Jake's, a silent understanding passing between them. She knew Damien Blackwood, his face flushed with a mixture of humiliation and barely concealed fear, lashed out immediately. To be shown such stark incompetence, especially by his own stunt double, was an affront he couldn't tolerate. "Get out!" he snarled, his voice trembling with suppressed rage, aimed at Jake. "Get out of my trailer, you insubordinate hack." He turned to Maria, his voice regaining its usual theatricality, though still edged with fury. "And you got a bruise to put an ice pack on. This is a private conversation." Maria, unfazed, simply nodded. "Just doing my rounds, Mr. Blackwood. Safety first." She exited, but not before giving Jake a small, almost imperceptible nod, a silent message of support. Damien, still seething, grabbed his phone, his fingers shaking as he scrolled through his contacts. He made a furious call to Director Miller, his voice a low, venomous growl. "Miller, it's Damien. Thorne was just in my trailer. The arrogance of the man he tried to demonstrate the Angel's Leap said I'd die. Can you believe it? He's clearly trying to undermine my authority, sabotage my performance. It's completely unacceptable. I want him off this set, immediately, for insubordination and damaging professional morale. If he stays, I walk. And you know what that means for your precious apex." Director Miller, a harried man perpetually caught between artistic vision and studio demands, was a pragmatist. He prioritized his star's ego and the film's reputation above all else. He listened to Damien's furious tirade, his face grim. "Understood. Damien. Consider it handled." He quietly began to arrange for Jake's dismissal from the production, effectively blacklisting him from future projects. The official reason would be creative differences or budgetary adjustments. But the message would be clear throughout Hollywood. Jake Thorne was difficult, overzealous, and prone to challenging his stars. The reader, privy to Damien's malicious intent and Director Miller's cynical acquiescence, understood the dramatic irony. Jake's courageous attempt to save Damien's life was being met with further professional ruin. A quiet master being exiled for the unforgivable sin of being right. The stage was set, not just for a climactic stunt, but for a real-life crisis that would irrevocably alter the fate of both men. The glittering expanse of Marina del Rey, California, usually a testament to sun-drenched luxury, shimmered under the pre-dawn glow. Tonight, it played host to Damien Blackwood's annual charity gala, a beacon of opulence aboard his private luxury yacht. The apex star. The yacht, a floating palace of polished chrome and tinted glass, was docked prominently, its decks awash in soft ambient light. It was a place of unassailable glamour, where Damien was the undisputed king, surrounded by Hollywood's elite, tech moguls, and political power players. This seemingly innocuous, glittering event was about to transform into a terrifying gauntlet, a confined arena where fate and a ruthless enemy would expose the fragility of fame. Jake, despite his recent blacklisting from the Apex production and the chilling silence from his usual industry contacts, had managed to gain entry to the gala, a nagging premonition of danger, a prickling sensation that had kept him awake for nights, combined with an obscure, almost instinctive desire to deliver a final, desperate warning, had compelled him. He moved through the throng of glittering attendees like a phantom, his simple dark suit a stark contrast to the designer labels surrounding him. He was utterly alone in this gilded cage. He had no official capacity, no badge to lend him authority, no support team. He was surrounded by a terrified, helpless elite, soon to be plunged into chaos. Damien, somewhere amidst the revelry, was too consumed by his own arrogance and the intoxicating hum of celebrity to offer any real assistance, or even heed a warning. Jake was the only one with the unique skill set, the honed instincts, and the mental fortitude to navigate the impending catastrophe and confront the escalating threat. The initial hours of the gala were a blur of polite conversation, clinking champagne flutes, and Damian Blackwood's booming laughter. Jake watched him from a discreet distance, a silent observer in a world he didn't belong to. He felt the subtle vibrations of the yacht, the gentle sway of the ocean, his senses heightened, searching for the first tremor of an unseen threat. Then, at precisely 11:37 p.m., a chilling, guttural roar ripped through the otherwise festive atmosphere. It was not a sound of a party, but of metal tearing, of wood groaning under immense pressure. The yacht lurched violently, sending champagne flutes crashing and guests tumbling. The lights flickered erratically, then died, plunging the main salon into a terrifying, inky blackness, punctuated only by emergency lights that cast long, dancing shadows. Panic erupted, a wave of guttural screams and desperate shouts. What was that? Someone shrieked. "We're sinking!" Another cried, their voice raw with terror. The crisis escalated with brutal efficiency. From the deck, the horrifying reality became clear. A massive, derelict freighter, its navigation lights dark, had veered wildly off course and slammed into the side of the Apex Star. It wasn't an accident. It was a calculated act of sabotage, driven by a ruthless international crime syndicate targeting one of the tech moguls on board. The impact had ruptured the yacht's hull, and water began to pour into the lower decks. Simultaneously, a thick, acrid smoke began to billow from the ship's engine room, a secondary act of terror. The yacht, though luxurious, was now a sinking death trap, trapped in the narrow confines of the harbor, its gangways severed, its emergency rafts compromised. Through the chaos, a frantic voice cut through the terrified screams. It was Damian Blackwood, his voice stripped of its usual bravado, now raw with undisguised panic. "Help! I'm trapped!" The main stairwell collapsed. He was somewhere on the lower deck, his usual escape routes blocked. Jake didn't hesitate. This was the moment. This was the ultimate test. He was the only one who could navigate this. His internal clock, honed by a lifetime of split-second decisions, began to tick furiously. He knew he had a rapidly closing window for escape, for rescue. The smoke was thickening, making breathing difficult. The sound of rushing water below deck was growing louder, a monstrous gurgle that spoke of imminent doom. He moved, a blur of silent efficiency, through the panicked crowd. He saw a terrified woman trying to open a jammed emergency door, a child crying desperately in her arms. He didn't stop, but shouted instructions. "Kick the lower hinge angle your weight." His mind was already miles ahead, calculating structural weaknesses, escape routes, the most efficient path to Damien. The crisis demanded every specialized skill Jake possessed. The opulent yacht, now a crumbling death trap, became his obstacle course. He used his acrobatic prowess, scaling collapsed walls of ruined cabins, leaping across chasms where the deck had buckled. He utilized his parkour training, wall running across tilted corridors, sliding down banisters that hung precariously. He located the source of the smoke, the ruptured fuel lines, and with a few deft, almost unconscious movements, managed to reroute a malfunctioning fire suppression system to contain the immediate blaze. His movements were fluid, precise, honed by decades of silent practice. He knew Damien was on the lower deck, near the master suite, where a section of the main staircase had buckled, trapping him. Jake calculated the quickest, most dangerous path through a ventilation shaft that ran horizontally above the flooded deck. He squeezed his body into the narrow, smoke-filled conduit, ignoring the searing heat and the claustrophobia. He heard Damien's panicked screams echoing from below. He pushed himself forward, his muscles burning, his breath ragged. He had to reach Damien and the trapped guests. He had to disarm any further threats the saboteurs might have left. He had to secure an escape route for everyone before time ran out, before the yacht succumbed to the relentless sea or was consumed by fire. Every ticking second amplified the desperate urgency of his task. The luxury yacht, once a symbol of Damien's boundless ego, had become a crucible of their shared fate. And Jake Thorne, the mocked stunt double, was its only hope for survival. The luxury yacht, the apex star, was no longer a symbol of opulence but a scene of terrifying chaos. Smoke, thick and acrid, choked the air, stinging the eyes and burning the lungs. The groaning of tortured metal, the rushing gurgle of water, and the desperate screams of trapped guests formed a horrifying symphony of impending doom. Miles, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs, navigated the crumbling, smoke-filled corridors, his path illuminated by the sporadic, eerie flicker of emergency lights. Every instinct, every fiber of his being, was focused on one objective: Damien Blackwood. He found Damien, not in a heroic stance, but cowering, utterly paralyzed by terror, trapped beneath a massive, twisted beam that had collapsed from the ceiling. Damien was screaming, a high-pitched, almost childlike wail that echoed his complete breakdown. The arrogant facade was gone, replaced by raw, unadulterated fear. Other terrified guests, huddled in various corners, stared at the scene, too consumed by their own panic to offer any aid. Ignoring the other, terrified, helpless guests for a crucial moment, Jake focused solely on the most critical threat. His movements were precise, economical, a blur of controlled power. He executed a series of impossible acrobatic maneuvers, scaling collapsing walls of ruined cabins with only a few handholds, swinging across chasms where the deck had buckled and split open, disarming malfunctioning security systems with a few deft movements of his hands, bypassing shorted circuits and sparking wires. He moved through the chaos as if it were a meticulously choreographed sequence, his body reacting with an innate understanding of physics and leverage. He reached Damien, his face grim, a silent promise in his eyes. With a superhuman effort, a primal roar tearing from his throat, Jake braced his legs and, with a powerful upward surge, lifted the immense twisted beam off the screaming actor. Damien scrambled out, his body trembling, his eyes wide with a mixture of terror and disbelief. "This way," Jake barked, his voice raw but resolute. He didn't waste time on explanations. He quickly, concisely outlined the escape route, a path only he, with his intimate knowledge of the yacht's structural weaknesses and emergency schematics, could have devised. He pointed to a hidden emergency exit in the hull, a narrow, seldom-used service hatch that led directly to a lower, less damaged deck, and, hopefully, to the relative safety of the harbor waters below. He began to direct the terrified guests, pushing them towards this unlikely salvation, his voice a steady anchor in the sea of panic. Breathless moment. As Jake attempted to lead Damien through a particularly narrower, rapidly closing passage, the yacht groaned, a sickening, drawn-out sound that vibrated through the floor. A massive secondary explosion, muffled but powerful, rocked the apex star, ripping through the stern. The force of the blast sent a new wave of debris raining down, and with a horrifying shriek of tortured metal, A critical structural support beam directly over their heads began to buckle, splitting the ceiling above them. For a heart-stopping second, it seemed all hope was lost. The passage began to collapse, raining concrete dust and twisted rebar, threatening to trap them in a tomb of their own making. Damien screamed again, utterly paralyzed by fear, his legs frozen. Jake's eyes widened, a flicker of pure terror passing through them, a fleeting acknowledgement of the impossible odds. He couldn't stop the collapse. He couldn't. But then, a primal surge of his specialized training, a lifetime of pushing limits, took over. "Move!" he bellowed, shoving Damien with all his might through the last remaining, rapidly shrinking gap in the crumbling passage. Damien stumbled through, falling onto the relative safety of the adjacent corridor. Then, with a desperate, split-second free-running maneuver that defied gravity and logic, Jake launched himself sideways. He pushed off the collapsing wall, his body twisting, contorting, sliding through the rapidly closing gap, literally a hair's breadth from being crushed. He emerged, battered, bleeding from a fresh gash on his forehead, but miraculously alive, landing in a low roll beside the terrified Damien. The passage completely collapsed behind him with a thunderous roar, sealing them off from the inferno they had just escaped. He pulled the shaking, whimpering Damien to his feet. They were out. Outside, on the pier. The scene was a chaotic swirl of flashing lights and shouting. Emergency services, fire trucks, ambulances, police cruisers were a deafening symphony of urgent response. Maria Rodriguez, the set medic, who had alerted authorities to Jake's presence at the gala after her earlier conversation with him, watched with bated breath from the edge of the pier. She saw the smoke, the flickering flames, the distant, impossible sight of Jake and Damien emerging from the smoke-filled yacht through the narrow, little-known service hatch, a testament to Jake's impossible knowledge. Other guests, now safe on the pier, their designer clothes soaked and torn, their faces streaked with soot and tears, stared in stunned disbelief. They had witnessed chaos, pure, unadulterated survival. When news crews, drawn by the scale of the disaster, arrived on the scene, they captured the raw, unedited footage of Jake's heroic actions, the defiant leap, the superhuman strength, the last-second escape. The footage of Damien's earlier panic, his utterly helpless screams, would soon be juxtaposed with Jake's calm, precise heroism. Damien Blackwood, safe but utterly shaken, looked at Jake. The arrogant mask had been stripped away, revealing a profound vulnerability. His face was contorted in a mixture of profound shock, shame, and overwhelming, undeniable gratitude. He saw the gash on Jake's forehead, the exhaustion in his eyes, the sheer, quiet force of the man who had risked everything for him. He collapsed to his knees on the wet pier, utterly broken, his celebrity reduced to nothing in the face of true bravery. His initial mocking attitude, his dismissive words, were obliterated, reduced to ashes by the fire and fury of the night. The police, the firefighters, the terrified survivors, all realized that the overpaid technician, the mocked double, was the only true hero on that terrifying night. Jake's victory was not just a personal triumph of skill, it was a public vindication, a profound recognition of his true, unassuming heroism, and an irreversible reversal of the public's perception. The Invisible Man had finally, spectacularly, stepped into the light. The smoke slowly cleared from Marina del Rey, revealing the mangled remains of the Apex Star, a stark monument to what had almost been. The raw, unfiltered news footage of Damien Blackwood's paralyzing fear and Jake Thorne's incredible, impossible heroism went viral within minutes. It spread like wildfire, a global spectacle of raw human frailty and quiet, unassuming strength. Damien Blackwood, his arrogance stripped away by the near-death experience and the undeniable heroism of his mocked stunt double, was publicly humbled in a way no PR team could have ever orchestrated or salvaged. Days later, a still-shaken Damien, his face pale and his eyes red-rimmed, stood before a phalanx of cameras and microphones in a hastily arranged press conference. Gone were the slick suits and the condescending smiles. He wore a simple, unadorned black shirt. His posture bowed. His voice, usually booming with manufactured charisma, was raw, tinged with a profound, almost heartbreaking sincerity. "I stand before you today," he began, his voice cracking with emotion. "A man profoundly changed. I have lived a life of privilege, of fame, of ego, and I allowed that ego to blind me, to make me dismissive, even cruel, to those who truly protect us, those who truly embody courage." He paused, taking a visible, shaky breath. "I publicly mocked Jake Thorne, my stunt double, a man whose quiet dedication I never truly appreciated. Last night, he saved my life. He saved countless lives. He is the hero, and I was, in my arrogance, nothing but a fool." He issued a heartfelt, tearful public apology, acknowledging his past disrespect and fully crediting Jake for his undeniable bravery and skill. He announced a personal commitment to donating a substantial portion of his future earnings to stunt performers' rights and safety initiatives, promising to use his platform to champion the unseen heroes of Hollywood. His carefully cultivated celebrity image, once a fortress of vanity, was forever altered, replaced by a new, sober humility that, ironically, garnered him more genuine respect than any of his previous roles. This Type B adversary, initially blinded by pride, underwent a profound transformation, recognizing his errors and becoming a genuine advocate for the very people he had once scorned. The reverberations of the Apex Star disaster and Jake's heroism shook Hollywood to its core. Studio executives, directors, and producers, once dismissive of stunt professionals, were forced to reevaluate their priorities. Jake, now a national hero, was offered an unprecedented opportunity. A consortium of major studios, eager to rehabilitate their image and genuinely improve safety standards, approached him. "Mr. Thorne," a prominent studio head stated during a meeting in a sleek, minimalist conference room overlooking the Hollywood Hills, "your actions last night, they changed everything. We need your expertise. We want you to establish and lead a new, specialized, advanced stunt and safety academy. Think of it as a revolutionary institution with substantial funding, state-of-the-art facilities, and full creative control. Its mission to train the next generation of elite stunt performers, not just in incredible feats, but in unparalleled safety protocols, risk assessment, and the kind of intuitive problem-solving you displayed." This was not just a job. It was about validating his unique methods, about establishing a lasting legacy for the often unseen heroes of cinema. It was a chance to finally elevate his craft, to bring respect and recognition to an industry that had long thrived in the shadows. Jake, his eyes gleaming with a quiet purpose, accepted. Weeks later, as the wreckage of the Apex Star was slowly salvaged from Marina del Rey, Jake and Maria Rodriguez, the observant set medic who had been the first to truly see his worth, shared a quiet meal. They sat in Jake's now slightly less Spartan apartment, its minimalist decor softened by a few plants Maria had brought him. The scent of her homemade lasagna filled the air, a comforting aroma after weeks of adrenaline and chaos. "I always thought you were just incredibly careful, Jake," Maria admitted, a gentle smile on her face. "Meticulous. Obsessed, even. But now I see you were simply seeing risks no one else did. You had a sixth sense for danger." Jake, looking out at the shimmering lights of the city spread beneath the vast, inky sky, murmured, "It's not about seeking glory, Maria. It's about preparedness, about understanding the geometry of danger, about knowing when to push and when to pull back. And sometimes, the quietest actions, the ones no one sees, are the ones that speak the loudest when it truly matters." He gestured vaguely towards the city lights. "Hollywood. It's all about perception, about illusion. But sometimes reality intrudes, and when it does, you need substance, not just flash." Maria nodded, a new depth of understanding binding their friendship. "You're that substance, Jake. The real thing. They needed a hero, and they found one in the shadows." Their shared silence was comfortable, a testament to a bond forged in fire and shared experience. Jake, the once unappreciated artist of controlled risk, felt a profound sense of calm, a peace that had eluded him for years. The validation, the respect, felt earned, not given. And it was a more satisfying reward than any applause. 1 year later, the hum of Hollywood had subtly, yet fundamentally, shifted. The perception of stunt work, once a peripheral afterthought, had fundamentally transformed. The industry, still obsessed with spectacle, now held a newfound respect for the unseen artistry and profound bravery of the individuals who brought those spectacles to life. Jake Thorne was no longer the anonymous stunt double. He was a revered figure in the film industry, a quiet legend whose name was spoken with respect and admiration. His advanced stunt and safety academy, nestled discreetly in the foothills overlooking the sprawling lights of Los Angeles, was flourishing. It was a state-of-the-art facility, producing the most sought-after stunt performers in the business. His methods, emphasizing precision, physiological understanding, and an almost intuitive grasp of risk assessment, revolutionized safety standards across the board. His graduates were known not only for their unparalleled skill, but also for their ethical approach, their quiet confidence, and their unwavering dedication to the craft. Jake's life, once solitary and defined by anonymous discipline, was now rich with the purpose of mentorship, the intellectual challenge of innovation, and the vibrant camaraderie of a thriving community. He had found profound fulfillment, his quiet mastery finally recognized and revered. Damian Blackwood, sobered and genuinely transformed by his near-death experience, became a vocal and unwavering advocate for Jake's academy. The raw footage of his panic during the Apex Star disaster and Jake's heroism had irrevocably altered his public persona. He was no longer the arrogant star. He was a man humbled, authentically committed to making amends. He publicly championed the unseen heroes of Hollywood, funding scholarships for aspiring stunt performers at Jake's Academy and using his vast platform to educate the public about the dangers and dedication involved in stunt work. He remained a successful actor, but his performances now carried a deeper, more grounded authenticity, infused with a newfound humility that resonated with audiences. Recognizing the broader societal need for the kind of practical skills he taught, Jake established a nationwide nonprofit initiative called the Youth Agility and Awareness Program, designed for underprivileged youth in underserved communities across America. The program focused not just on physical discipline, but on situational awareness, quick decision-making under pressure, and the importance of selflessness. It taught young people how to assess risks in everyday situations, how to react calmly in emergencies, and how to use their physical and mental faculties to help themselves and others. It was a tangible way for Jake to pay it forward, to empower a new generation with confidence, practical survival skills, and the profound understanding that true heroism isn't about fame or accolades, but about readiness, responsibility, and quiet selflessness. His workshops, held in community centers and school gyms, were always packed, inspiring countless young lives. The story ends with a poignant, sweeping shot of Jake, standing on the rooftop of his new academy building, overlooking the sprawling, glittering lights of Los Angeles. The city, a vibrant tapestry of dreams and illusions, stretched out before him. Below, in a state-of-the-art training facility, illuminated by banks of floodlights, young, aspiring stunt performers moved with precision and grace, practicing complex maneuvers, choreographed falls, intricate wirework, fluid combat sequences. Each movement was a testament to Jake's teaching, a living legacy. From the sidelines, watching the training with quiet reverence, stood Damian Blackwood, his posture humble, a genuine respect in his eyes. Beside him, Maria Rodriguez offered a warm, knowing smile. Damian looked up at Jake, a slight, almost imperceptible nod passing between them, a silent acknowledgement of their shared past, and a mutual respect forged in fire. Jake looked up at the vast, star-dusted Hollywood sky, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching his lips. On a mantelpiece in the Academy's meticulously organized Hall of Fame, a single, worn boxing glove, signed simply, "To Jake, keep punching, Coach Mike," sat quietly, a silent testament to his incredible journey. The city, vibrant and dreaming, pulsed with life, a world where the unseen heroes finally stood tall, where quiet mastery illuminated the way, and where a different kind of star now shone brightest. If this story stirred your heart, if it reminds you that courage can alter destinies and that light always finds a path even in the deepest darkness, please leave a comment. Share this story with those who need inspiration. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell to never miss our upcoming stories.